I need coffee. I don't have any right now. What is going on around here? I'll tell you what's going on around here. Roe v. Wade has been, dismantled and such. It's been dismantled. Come on, boys and girls. Take a knee for Christ the King. And why? He's victorious. Proven today, son. Come on now. Rock out. I hope you're super psyched out of your mind. Super pumped up beyond all belief. It's not over, though. That's why we got to take a knee every single day. In fact, right now, we got to be more pumped up than ever because the enemies of God, people we're talking about today, we're on the ball. We're talking about nihilism. You're going to see it all around. Your churches today have probably already, in fact, been notified. They've probably been notified, letting them know that it's danger out there. It's super dangerous. Yeah, I'm going to drink it right out of this mug today. I'm going to drink it right out of this. Come on now. And why? Because we're taking a knee for Christ the King. We got to do it. We've got to do it. He is the King over heaven and earth. All power and all dominion are His right now. They have been His for 2,000 years. They've been His forever and ever. But He ascended. He is seated right now at the right hand of the Father. And He's rocking. We know it. Ow! So, resolve right now in your heart, thought, word, deed, to Christ the King. Resolving to bring it down in complete conformity with the divine constitution of the visible church. And we do that here in three simple ways. We do that here by saying never give up, keep on smiling, and remember that we too, one day, we're gonna die. We're totally gonna die. It's gonna happen, each and every one of us. So we gotta dream bigger thoughts right now. You have to pray as hard as you can. What are your gifts? What are your talents? And listen closely, because once the Lord has told you, you got a lot of work to do. Totally true. Totally true. Yeah, my family, man, they're letting me down. They're letting me down. Not only did I not have coffee ready straight to the dome, it's amazing I was able to make it through. Normally without coffee, I'm like that gif of that chimp or whatever with like the oxygen up the nose, breathing real slow. That's basically what your boy's like without the coffee. And I don't have a straw. I don't have a straw. And I got all of my kids here, right? All of them. And of course, they're my little minions. They're the ones doing the work around this place, making sure everything is not running smoothly. I love them. I do. That's why I do the show, right? Every penny that we do goes toward their education at Sacred Heart Academy. And you can, of course, find out more at our Patreon, link in description below, as well as the Wolfpack chat. That's the real deal. In fact, all the patrons, if you're watching this right now, you're a patron, please go to the Wolfpack chat, okay? It saves me tons of time instead of having to re-upload and go and upload on YouTube and then re-upload to Patreon and blah, 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 to sit there and say, look, let's connect on Telegram. We can DM each other. We can do video chats. There's all sorts of things. Watch parties, live streams. Now we're coming up with a store. We coming up with the Wolfpack Superstore. Totally true. It's totally true. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I love you. You got to come in here. Come on, woman. I love you. That's my mega hot half Korean beauty queen wife, of course. Ailey, also known as Lovesick Me. It's true. Lovesick Me over on Telegram. It's an awesome thing. And we're able to connect and communicate. We can even set something up just for the patrons over on Telegram. It makes it way easier for us to get together, do live streams, share podcasts, share videos, all sorts of stuff that you're able to do. PDFs, even the chapters, like the original chapters of the book prior to edit, okay, that I'm working on about my daughter's life and death with childhood cancer and how that led our family back to the faith. I can be putting that just for patrons over there if you want to become one of those, because all the stuff that we do, we're not charging for any of it. And so, there's absolutely no charge for anything. In fact, the only thing that there's ever a charge for ever is what we're about to show you, right? What we're about to show you before we move into the show is a real quick word from our sponsor over at SAINTMAKER. You got to do it. I'll let it speak for itself, but it does speak for itself, and it's one of these things that once you've incorporated the SAINTMAKER into your life, you are going to be on a trajectory insofar as you do it. Insofar as you do it, you will be on the fast track of upward and onward. It's what happens. Right? Like a steam engine. It's just constantly dumping, coal into that bad boy and just going as fast as you can. You better buckle in, son. You better buckle in, girl. Speaking of girls, real quick, just as a note, I've heard the outcry from the ladies, okay? It's true, right? Because dudes have this way of dominating conversations. So we do a lot of live chats every single day, about an hour and a half to 2 hours of live chats over on Telegram, talking about apologetics, theology, life, even food, dating, marriage, all that sort of stuff. And it's great. But guys tend to dominate it. And there have been a bunch of people who say, look, this is a crazy little world you've got here. It's a crazy little empire you've built. And they would like to learn how to defend the faith, but to do it and to learn it in a way that they're able to ask questions, that they're able to express concerns and things for us to consider. And so I've been reaching out to people. I've been reaching out to various guests, and we have an all-women's chat over there, the Lunapack chat. It's awesome. And we're going to infiltrate that periodically to do videos that are about the faith and defending the faith. And so that's going to be awesome. We're going to bring in a whole bunch of different people. I've already lined up about 3 or 4 of them. And of course, we have our Fat Shame to Fitness. I'll talk about that after the SAINTMAKER. So if you've already bought your SAINTMAKER, or if you've already seen this and you've memorized all the words, make sure to go grab your coffee, and we'll be back in about 90 seconds. Can a personal planner really make you a saint? Not by itself. But in our day and age of addictive apps and glowing screens, we're bombarded by constant distraction, and our quest for sainthood often takes a backseat. The SAINTMAKER is the first high-performance planner for the spiritual life, made by faithful Catholics for faithful Catholics. It's a work of genius, really, fusing the wisdom of the saints with the science of personal productivity. It's rigorous, but sainthood is tough, and most of us need help organizing our time, our work, our leisure, and our devotion, because that can help you become a saint. The SAINTMAKER is elegant, fits in your purse or briefcase, and is a perfect companion for your missal, Bible, or rosary. Published 4 times per year, each season includes daily planning pages, feast days, and devotions for both forms of the liturgical calendar, goal-setting pages, confession journals, and more. It's why the SAINTMAKER is used by hardworking Catholics, like CEO of Sock Religious Scott Williams, best-selling author Sam Guzman, YouTubers like Amber Schneider, a Catholic wife Dina Barca, and Brian Holdsworth, and priests like Father Corey Stitcha. Try the SAINTMAKER out, and if you decide that it's not for you, you can send it back for a full refund within 90 days. So go right now. Find your life planner at thesaintmaker.com. Quantities are limited though, so head on over to thesaintmaker.com to order yours and to start your SAINTMAKER journey today. You got to do it right there, saintmaker.com/PaleocratDiaries, promo code in the description below. We got it right here. There we go. There's the sound. I hope you love that sound, by the way. You know what it is. If you've been tuning in for a while, you know what that sound is. It is the PaleocratDiaries alert system, because we are about to enter the octagon of history. We are about to enter the octagon of nihilism. We're living in it. We're living in it right now, right? In all of its many phases. We're going to talk about phase 1 today. We're going to tackle liberalism. And we're going to tackle it big time. And by tackle it big time, it's like that gif of that little kid with, I think he's got a disability or something. And he's running around, and he's got the football, and everyone's cheering and everything, and some dude comes and wham! The only problem is this kid is not innocent. Liberalism is, in fact, a foaming at the mouth, salivating demon that is ravaging civilization as we know it. And there's tons and tons of Catholics who have fallen prey to the nonsense. And they're in clown world, and they're thrashing about in the throes of death, wondering, why is nothing working? My apologetic method, it's not working. It's not stemming the tide of the great apostasy, the crisis, and all these things. And they've got this answer, and that answer, and this answer, and that answer. And all they're doing is pruning trees. It's garbage. It has not worked. The experiment has failed. And that's why we roll up, right? We roll up with the Kaiser shades. It's true. It's true. We come howling at the sun every single day, taking a knee for Christ the King, resolved in everything, every thought, every word, every deed, taking a knee. Because we're restoring all things in Christ. Not little bit here, not little bit there, everything, everywhere. That's what we are doing, and we are unashamed. We are unashamed. We're unapologetic in our apologetics. We are robustly and offensively Catholic. It's true. It's totally true. You know it. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this book. This is part 2, by the way. Part 1, if you missed it, is over at ya boys' YouTube channel. We're going to be doing a lot more over there. You got to go. So let everybody know. No more shame. No more hiding under a bushel. No more fear. The world needs you desperately. Classmates, co-workers, friends, family, even your frenemies, especially those buggers, they need you. So no more being ashamed, no more hiding the faith that makes you who you are. No more. It's the only way that we're going to have any resolution. Otherwise, clown world. Otherwise, more of the same. And piecemeal victories here and there. And ideas sometimes that because we won one victory, that it's over. And one of the fears that I have, having worked as a chief aide to a top lobbyist in New Jersey, with a main focus, in fact, on abortion and those issues related to it, life issues in general, is that for a lot of people, they think in terms like that are cartoony. So it's like war, right? Oh, we bombed the bad guys. The bad guy is gone. Yay. And they don't think about the phrase blowback. They don't understand blowback. People who are into different theories regarding military operations and the like, and understanding and evaluating the facts on the ground, they know very well of this thing called blowback. In fact, wasn't it something, one of the books that Ron Paul told, was it Rudy Giuliani? Told him he had to read. He gave him a book list to read. One of those books is a book called Blowback, and we're going to experience blowback over this. Okay, the wicked demon that we're up against right now, the powers and principalities of the world, are not going to go to sleep silently in the dark. So they're going to embark on this crazy, vengeful, violent reaction. That's the way that these revolutionaries work. And so we've already seen it. There's, word of communication. And you got to be careful with some of this. People have said, that people are reaching out to churches saying there's going to be a potential ramifications, that you're going to see crazy violence and stuff. You need to be on guard against that. That's true. However, if you go and you actually go to the website for the government that talks about this, my wife did yesterday, and she started reading it. It reads like the end of a commercial about, Viagra or something, with like a bazillion side effects. And it's like people who it lists off almost everybody. I mean, there's foreign actors, there's people, supremacists of all different kinds, and separatists and radicals and extremists, and they're all out to get you. It's all part of one thing. And in that list is churches and stuff to do with the issue that we're dealing with now. So it's raised it's heightened the sense of the need for security, for example, that sort of a thing. But if you look, it's basically, you can see it maybe as a perfect example of, in a perfect image, right? I should take a screenshot of this to show that this liberal paradigm is caving in on itself. It's balkanized to the extreme. And that we are now in a day and age of power politics, okay? So power politics is a real problem. But that's what we're facing. Oh yeah, I got to take these things off. Otherwise, I won't be able to read. So you got, those are my intro shades. It's like Mr. Rogers. He's got his sweater and stuff and his shoes that he laces up. I got my glasses. It's basically the same thing. He would have done it that way if he would have had those glasses. Mr. Can you imagine? He'd be all sorts of based. He was a little bit, wasn't he, Mr. Rogers? Okay, real quick, before we move on, I just want to just say hi real quick to the people here. Window capture, there we go. Look at this. Good morning to all of you. I love, just look at the emojis, by the way. This is excitement, right? I don't know how often you see this sort of a thing, but I want you to just soak it in for a second. Just behold. And I'm not joking. Let's just sit and just enjoy this. Yeah. It's awesome. And it's every day. It's every day because it's the wolf pack, and we know how to pray and to play. We know how to have faith and have fun, right? To weep in this valley of tears and yet know that joy comes in the morning, that the world is filled, right? The way God has designed this is that the sun shines on the just and the unjust, and the rain pours on the just and the unjust. And so you've got both things going on here, and you can see this in the optics. Super excited about this. Kevin says, God bless the Kaiser and his family, the wolf pack, and life, right? Taking the knee every day, working on myself, man. Dude, I love that. And by the way, people working on themselves, if you would like to lose weight and keep it off, if you've noticed maybe, even from the side, I don't have that gobbler anymore. My face is thinning out. My shirts are fitting right. Everything else, that's because I'm losing weight. And I'm doing it with a simple thing. It's called the Fat Shame to Fitness program. I made it up. Fat Shame to Fitness. It's a free program, and it's real simple. You don't need to buy anything about it at all. It's just simply a couple simple rules. Eat when you're physically hungry, knowing the difference between the different kinds of hunger, like hungering for comfort, needing to get away from boredom, being depressed, all that sort of stuff. Distinguishing that from actual physical hunger that comes along with the cues that the body, God graciously gave us cues to know. And so to better realign ourselves with that, to eat only when you're hungry, to eat only until you are full. And that's probably, in reality, if you're being cognizant the entire time and saying, look, I just need to get to the place where my blood sugar's back up and I'm no longer feeling that sense of hunger. I'm content and quite full. That you only eat until you're full. You're going to probably eat about half or maybe even a third of what you were eating before, especially, if you're eating the kind of food that made your stomach into the size of a basketball, right? And in between meals, no caloric drinks, no snacks, but lots of prayer. And if you ever find yourself back at that fridge, you pray. You pray. And so, yeah, we're working on ourselves every day in a bunch of awesome, awesome ways. Yes. Howl if you love babies, man. Ow! Do big time. Big time. They're super pumped. Yeah, they're super pumped. Finally, people have snapped out of this. Yeah. Telegram is my go-to app anymore. No need to navigate. No need to go to negative Twitter or nonsense on Facebook. I rarely do anything on there. I still have them because people, they still go there. A lot of my family does Facebook and stuff. So I keep it open. But I only share stuff really, really rarely. Telegram is HQ. So I go there every day. If you want to connect with me, you got to just do it. Let's see. Glory to God. Today is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Yes, Rachel. I forgot to say that. But it's true, man. We got to rejoice. We got to rejoice. Let's see. God's Sacred Heart be adored. Yes. Today, by the way, happy Feast of the Sacred Heart. I'm going to not only be going to an awesome Mass tonight, I'm going to be going and enjoying that Mass with Jake Fowler and his family. They're going to be here. We're actually going to have an episode. I don't know if it'll be on Meaning of Catholic on my own channel, if we'll do more than one. We'll find out. So it's going to be a bunch of fun. Christine says the Kaiser shades are fire. Totally true. Totally true. Yes. It's not just babies. It's a full human who gets his descendants denied as well. Brother. Yes. This will start a persecution, though. Be prepared. Totally 100%. Yeah, so in the Citizen Free Press, Clarence Thomas said gay marriage is next. Hey, yeah, and consecration of Russia related. How many things, bro? How many things? Let's see, last one. Telling my kids all about it this morning. First, prayers of thanksgiving, and then an overview of how sins cloud the mind. Let's pray for those who rail against God and his justice. Speaking of those who rail against God and his justice. Speaking of those, okay, so episode 1 of this series on apologetics, focusing on nihilism, from a Catholic presuppositional perspective, which has, look, the empire is expanding. It's obvious. I shared just yesterday, just on Telegram, the people who have been greatly impacted by this and the people who share comments about how they use this method with great effect all the time, how it's completely transformed not only their apologetic and witness, but also, beyond that, their own faith, that they're no longer monocling it up. That they sit there and go, it's an impossibility of the contrary. What am I going to do? Where else shall I go? To whom shall I go? No, we ain't leaving. We're not budging. But the first episode of this was on where was it? It was on my Paleocrat channel. And you can see the link in the description below. You'll see a link to the full catalog. I'm actually going to make, my wife came up with it yesterday. She's like, make a playlist just for enthusiasm, just for Licence, just for secular age, just for the Catholic presuppositional stuff, just for sedevacantism. And that way people can just share the catalog itself. They don't ever need to go and try to look through all the stuff because it's a lot. Your boy's been busy. So, okay, the stages of nihilistic dialectic, going, of course, through nihilism, and I explain why I use this particular book by Eugene Father Seraphim Rose. It's The Root of the Revolution of the Modern Age, quite possibly the best, most succinct definition and deconstruction of nihilism available. Nihilist phenomena reduce themselves to 3 or 4 principal types, and these few types are, further, related to each other as stages in a process which we may call the nihilistic dialectic. So right out of the gate, systems analysis, right? You're saying there's multiple systems here. There's multiple different types, these schools, these networked notions regarding authorities and stuff, and there's overlap. One stage of nihilism opposes itself to another, not to combat it effectively, but to incorporate its errors into its own program and carry mankind one step further on the road to the abyss that lies at the end of all nihilism. I wanted to bring this up because people will go, well, look, you've got classical liberals and various people, realists, and they're all disagreeing with each other and stuff, and they don't like the other side. They think it goes too far. That's what I would emphasize. They just think, wow, it just goes too far. That's all this is. The most basic core underlying assumptions are the same. They get fleshed out a little bit differently here and there, and those schools compete. They fight against each other. And in fact, even though there's a sequence, you can kind of demonstrate this in history. At the same time, every line of that sequence will have the entire spectrum. So it's not so simple. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's nuanced. The arguments at each stage are often effective in pointing out certain obvious deficiencies of a preceding or succeeding stage. Okay? But no criticism is ever radical enough, and radical down to the root, right down to the core, to touch on the common errors all stages share, and the partial truths which are admittedly present in all forms of nihilism. Yeah. Now, let me turn this up a little bit. I'll see if that, yeah, it's have to talk kind of loud. Let's see. I'll scoot you closer. By the way, do you like the mic? I do. I like this mic. Thank you, Phil, by the way. Let's see. So these it's not radical enough to touch on common errors all of the stages share, and the partial truths which are admittedly present in all forms of nihilism. And that's one of the tricky things, isn't it? The partial truths. The devil's real sneaky at that sort of thing, isn't he? Right? Super dupe sneaks. The kind of thing that says, look, you know, you've got a little bit of truth here, a little bit of truth there. People say, well, I can understand that. I can understand. So one of the things people criticize about Catholic presuppositionalism is they're like, oh, you're denying that these people have any notions of truth. Not true. Not true. In fact, that's the strength of the argument, is that they're saying things that are in fact true. That they're doing things that are in fact moral, but that their system in and of itself cannot account for that. It lacks the necessary preconditions. And ultimately, right, they're not only admittedly present in all forms of nihilism, but in the end, only tactics are used to seduce men to the great falsehood that underlies them all. And that's a facade. So you got a facade going on where people say, well, yeah, there's disagreements between this group and that. But you listen and you go, it's kind of weird, though, because they're both flowing from the same source. Their roots are the same. The stages are not to be understood as merely chronological, though in the narrowest sense, they are in fact a kind of chronicle of the development of the nihilist mentality from the time of the failure of the nihilist experiment of the French Revolution to the rise and fall of the latest and most explicit nihilist manifestation of the revolution found in National Socialism. I would say we're seeing now with SJWism, right? So, I mean, it's just as authoritarian, just as totalitarian, right? Radical absolutist collectivism with a facade of diversity in it, right? But it's this imposed, crazy kind of diversity, very unnatural, very, one size fits all. And if you dare to get outside of that, you're going to be deplatformed, depersoned, condemned to a lifetime of lashing yourself for the way that you were born. J.S. Mill in this would be the typical liberal, right? The age of realism is exemplified on the one hand by socialist thinkers, and on the other side, exploiters of science. So you'd have folks, you'd have folks like Bill Nye, the not so science guy. Vitalism in the forms of symbolism, occultism, artistic expressionism, and various evolutionary and mystical philosophies. We see this like crazy. How many conversations do you get in where it boils down to the answer? It's the evolution of the gaps. Science of the gaps, evolution of the gaps. No. And so it's one of these things where you go, they're like, oh, well, where do morals come from? We evolved. We evolved and we got morals. And that's the ultimate authority. It's a magic trick. And it's garbage because they're using some kind of an ethical model by which to decide that one idea of how we've evolved is better than another. And which group we need to really focus on in a world that's very different. In fact, the vast majority of people in the world would be opposed to the last month of, disgraceful pride. They'd say, oh yeah, no, I don't support that. It's a very Western thing, a very weird thing. And that Haitian tradition, right? Jonathan Haidt of saying Western, educated, industrialized, okay, rich, democratic, weirdos. It'll be noticed that these periods overlap. For nihilism matures at a different rate in different peoples and in different individuals. So different places around the world, different individuals in and of themselves, microcosm, macrocosm, you got it. The overlapping is in fact, is more extreme than the simple scheme that we propose can suggest. So much so that the representatives of every stage can be found in every period. And all of them exist contemporaneously, even today. What is true of historical periods is true also of individuals. There is no such thing as a pure nihilist at any stage. So you've got shades and degrees, both in individuals and in groupings of individuals. With these reservations, however, our scheme may perhaps be accepted as at least an approximation to what has been an undeniable historical and psychological process. So it's without a doubt, even if people say, yeah, but there's a bunch of shades, you say, yes, the development of the process psychologically, historically, we can see the development of this in the predominant schools play out over time. In fact, this is the collapse, the death throes of civilization in certain models. It runs this course. We're going to here attempt no more than to describe these stages and to point out by reference to the definition of nihilism that we've adopted in what respect they may be characterized as nihilist. And we begin today, we're going to focus on liberalism. Right? Maybe you've heard people say, well, I'm a liberal, or I'm a classical liberal. And they use that phrase. Most often, they'll associate that with certain heroes that they like, right? Founding fathers, certain economists, certain politicians, certain cultural heroes or icons. And they'll associate it with that. That's fine. It's inevitable, in fact. However, at the same time, that doesn't address exactly what that person believed. It's associating it with an authority figure, but not with the ultimate authorities themselves. But for many people, and in fact, this is a little bit of the sign of the times, is their ultimate authority is in fact wrapped up in the person. That only makes sense if that person is the Lord, because the Lord is also all truth. All truth, wisdom, knowledge found in him. Yeah. Liberalism is rather a passive, right? Is not, let us state at the outset, an overt nihilism. So right away, let's be clear, liberalism is not the exact same as overt nihilism. Instead, it's a passive nihilism, or better yet, the neutral breeding ground of the more advanced stages of nihilism. Those who followed the discussion earlier concerning the impossibility of spiritual or intellectual neutrality, we talked about that in episode 1. In the description below, go to the link of the catalog, you'll see it. It's the last episode I did. In this world, they'll understand immediately why we've classified as nihilist a point of view which, while not directly responsible for any striking nihilist phenomena, has been an indispensable prerequisite for their appearance. So we're talking preconditions here. We're saying, in the logical sequence of things, where did it begin? What's the idea? These are consequences, and those consequences are themselves ideas, but those ideas began somewhere. And they contain something. They contain, right, there's content to the idea. The incompetent defense by liberalism of a heritage in which it is never fully believed has been one of the most potent causes of overt nihilism. I got to tell you, this is one of the things that first drove me away from it. I started really thinking, like, I remember I started using this phrase. It's not original to me. My dad used it. Probably wasn't original to him, right? But the idea that when talking about politics and talking about conservatives and classical liberals and leftists and all of this, it really felt as though, in the end, the conservative wing, which I had been identified with, the conservative wing of things was really about pumping the brakes of the clown car. They're like, look, we're trying to just pump the brakes and show that we're trying to just preserve a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that over here and over there, anywhere we can. And we're just trying, it's inevitable. And sometimes it's like easing people in. Like they're grooming you for the nihilistic revolution. And they're like, oh, just ease in. It's okay. You'll be all right. You'll go to sleep in the dark night. It's true. But just rest assured, we've been pumping the brakes. It's what it felt like. I felt that way listening to talk radio hosts. And you can see it play out a lot this way, where it starts out as a principled opposition to something. They end up losing. And what do? They just want power over it later. That's all. It's no longer so much a principled opposition. And it's because in reality, maybe it wasn't so principled in the beginning. Or at least it was an approximate one or an espoused one. But ultimately, their most ruling priority, their most ruling principles was that you go with the flow ultimately. Doesn't mean you got to go full bore, but you're still going to make it to the same place. The liberal humanist civilization may be principally characterized by an attitude to truth. This is not an attitude of open hostility, nor even of deliberate unconcern, for its sincere apologists undeniably have a genuine regard for what they consider to be the truth. Rather, it's an attitude in which truth, despite certain appearances, no longer occupies the center of attention. The liberal still speaks, right, of things like human dignity, eternal verities, faith, of man's high calling or his unquenchable spirit, even of so-called Christian civilization. But it's quite clear that these words no longer mean what they once meant. I want to stress, though, this is not, there's a kind of inevitability a little bit to this, right? We experience this all the time. That's what the entire Secular Age series that I did, that's what it was about, was how did we get here? It's the same message at the end of Belloc's book on the Four Men. The end of his book is, in fact, the preface to the book. Same thing. It really is talking about how do you maintain those eternal things in a world that really is changing, and it's way different from the one you grew up in. An example of this. Go and look. There's a video of Buddy Holly. I don't know if you know that guy, Buddy Holly, the old singer, right, died in a plane crash. Super sad situation. With the La Bamba guy, if I remember right. Was it La Bamba and Chubby Checkers? Not Chubby Checkers. Anyway, died. Sad thing. There's a video, though. There's a video of him playing, I think, Peggy Sue, the song Peggy Sue. And he's on a show with these ladies that are very neatly dressed. Beautiful women, right? They're all like moms, right? They're all real beautiful moms. And they're wearing these beautifully elegant dresses. They've got the gloves. It looks really great. And they're talking and saying that, this guy, Buddy Holly, he does this. He's a rock and roll specialist. He's a rock and roll specialist, and it's what all the kids are into. And, you should be a little bit more accepting to say, to understand them, to get where they're coming from, that sort of a thing. And go back and look at what was so controversial, and then turn on a radio. It's not the same. Look at your own playlist. It's not your mama's playlist. It's definitely not grandma's playlist. Granny would be, if she's died before the advent of developments in rock and metal and punk and all that. If they died prior to that, rolling over in their grave. Truth in a word has been reinterpreted. The old forms have been emptied and given a new quasi-nihilistic content. This may easily be seen by a brief examination of several of the principal areas in which truth has been reinterpreted. And I love that he talks about this. And all truth to some extent is reinterpreted by us. I would only add, it's not so much that it's reinterpreted because God is the ultimate interpreter. He interprets all things. He pre-interprets them from our perspective, so we're interpreting them. That may be a better way of saying it. God is the pre-interpreter. He's the one. It's all according to his design, his purpose. They're made for his aim. Okay? And so insofar as we know something, we would know them in a way that is analogous to that, to his coherent understanding of all things. And so that's our interpreting it is in line and in reflecting. It's a reflection of his pre-interpretation of those things. So if it's reinterpreted, we got ourselves an issue, right? It's saying we can divorce that. We can divorce that from the idea that we must, in fact, think our thoughts after God. Or just simply that God thought them first. Now that's revealing, though. Not just about what it says about us, but what it says about God. Did God, in fact, make those things? Did God, in fact, think those things and interpret those things? Does he understand those things in a certain way? Is that even a real thing? Does God even exist? Does God even care? The theological order of the first truth is, of course, God. Everything created stands in relation to and dependence upon him. Everything in the world is ordered toward this end. So that's where we're coming from, right? Catholic Presuppositionalists, this is where we're coming from in our apologetic method. This is where, as members of the Wolfpack, we're coming from with every single thing that we do in our thoughts, our words, and our deeds as we align them in total conformity with the divine constitution of the visible church. The modern mentality cannot tolerate such a God. He is both too intimate, too personal, even too human, and too absolute, too uncompromising in his demands of us. And he makes himself known only to the humble, a fact bound to alienate the proud modern intelligence. But it has for a long time. It offended the proud and the so-called wise, the wise of the world, as far back as 2,000 years ago. In some ways, nothing new. Nothing new. But they can't tolerate it. And this, I think, is one of the reasons, and we'll hear more, I think it's one of the reasons why Catholic presuppositionalism bothers the daylights out of certain people. Because the God that we talk about is too personal. We aren't talking about some abstract idea or thing to plug in as a first cause only. And we're not taking time to get to that. We're coming up and saying, look, I'm Catholic, I got a rosary, right? I got a crucifix. You're here to talk to me about that. I know you're an unbeliever. You know that I am a Catholic. I'm not going to pussyfoot around. What's the point of that? That makes no sense. And he's too human. He's not lost in the abstract thinking of the modern philosophers that can boil it down to something like, redness or something, like atoms. They can say, oh, it's so small. It's not even, they look at all these objects and they know that the atoms are there, but that's not really what they're thinking about. And for good reason. Make it hard. Imagine that. But the idea that to us, we talk about a Christ who was here 2,000 years ago, wind in his hair, sweat on the sides of his brow, sleepy at night, awake in the morning, praying by himself, right? The sand beneath his sandals. We talk about those things. We put flesh on him because he took flesh. And we're humble about it. We rely, in fact, revelation is not just an accessory. It's fundamental. It's fundamental. Not so, look, it is to the extent that anybody knowing anything, even if they're looking out at the world with natural theology, looking at the world God's made, it's reflecting his power, his divinity, and his attributes. To that extent, it is natural revelation. It's revealing of himself, even ourselves, revealing in the likeness and image that he made us in. In that way, self-revealing. Ultimately self-revealing, most robustly self-revealing in special divine revelation. And without those things, we can come to a whole host of ideas about the world and morality and knowledge, and those things can in fact be quite useful, but terribly insufficient. And by insufficient, they're insufficient in the exact areas, in the exact kind of ways that make them ultimately cave in on themselves. It's not like they're just a dude missing an arm. This intention is clear, right? Already in people like Descartes. You've got a new God, right? Clearly required by modern man, a God more closely fashioned after the pattern of such central modern concerns as science and business. Anyone who's followed my work for a long time, even as far back as Holy Faith Media, where it was mainly about politics and civilization and culture, stuff like that, I talked a lot about civilizational models, the development from high culture, right, to economic man, or civilization man, economic man, ultimately down to the power politics of modern times. And the way that people talk, right? The way that people talk in that period, where do you go to church? And then it turns into, where do you work? Right? That sort of thing. Their concern in meeting you is redirected to something purely temporal. It's brought to fruition in the deism of enlightenment. Developed to its end in German idealism. The new God is not a being, but an idea. It's an idea. It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle piece. Sorry about that popping there. It's a puzzle piece. You have to have the key to the puzzle, and this is where it fits. It's like taking the idea of saying, I have no need for that hypothesis. We criticize that all the time, right? We criticize it all the time, and that's true. But to take the flip side of that and be like, well, it's just a hypothesis. Oh, it's a good hypothesis. It answers a lot of things. Even right there, it's not an it. He is a he. We're talking persons. Persons of the Trinity, the being of God. And so we've got ourselves in a real bind right from the get-go. Right from the get-go. And why do they need the hypothesis? Well, it's a fitting word, because they still feel the need for an explanation. Because they've lost the desire for salvation, so they need an explanation at least. How did we get here? They're more concerned as to how did we get here in this temporal order than how ought we then to live in the temporal order so that we can live forever with the Lord. This is the dead God of philosophers who require only a first cause, and that's only to complete their system. I say, we do need God, but that God is not the living, breathing God, right, of Christ Jesus our Lord. It is not the God very much alive, shaking mountains, speaking in the wind, right, in the scriptures, doing these remarkable things, speaking from a burning bush, with theophanies and the like, with the incarnation. It's more of an idea. It's more, again, of a puzzle piece. It's just the corner. You need the puzzle piece. Otherwise, the puzzle piece is incomplete, and that's it. But it's not about completeness. Well, it is, but not just in the sense that says, well, my system is complete. It's good to have that. In fact, it's necessary. You must have that. However, why do you need that? Is it because you just want a mega dope system? Or is it because the God of the universe gave us that system and gave us that system so that we may love him and serve him in this life and in the next? What is it? You have these sophists, right? Religious sophists who invented God because they, quote, need him. Then they think to use him at will, whether deists, idealists, pantheists, eminentists. All the modern gods are the same mental construct, fabricated by souls dead from the loss of faith in the true God. The atheist arguments against such a God are as irrefutable as they are irrelevant, for such a God is, in fact, the same as no God at all. If you're going to debate, by the way, if you're going to debate with an unbeliever, at least be defending the one true God, not some abstract idea, not some puzzle piece missing from their system. Come with God. Come at him with the Lord. Do you believe in him? Do you love him and serve him? Why mask and say, it's a magic trick? I'm not talking about that one. In the Old Testament, in the New Testament, no, yeah, I'm really just talking about some God that's way more general. Way more general, just a general thing. Is it a person? Is it in what way, does this God care? Is it a person? Now, they're like, well, we'll get to that. Well, why not just start with that, by the way? And I can understand some people going, well, I really want to tiptoe. At least they can accept like that. And it's like you're revealing, again, your zipper's down and your presuppositions are showing. It's still a puzzle piece. It's like talking about, your wife and doing it in this like really abstract way and she's sitting right next to you. You're introduced, as long as they believe in like a woman, say, my wife is right here. This is our Lord. This is our Savior. This is our triune God. And here's why, without that, yes, your system is toast, but more importantly, you are doomed to die. And not just on this side of the grave, but you will have a very terrible time, in fact, on the other. Repent or perish. Nihilist atheism is the explicit formulation of what was already not merely implicit, but actually present in a confused form in liberalism. The ethical implications of belief in such a God are precisely the same as those of atheism. This inner agreement, however, is again disguised outwardly behind a cloud of metaphor. In the Christian order, all activity in this life is viewed and judged in the light of the life of the future world, right? The life beyond death, which will have no end. So that's how we evaluate it. We evaluate it not in and of itself. It's insufficient. What's the deal with that? You're ultimately dealing with things that are incumbent upon you in a covenantal way. You're either a covenant keeper or a covenant breaker. You're one of the two. You'll be judged that way in the end. And that's what it's for. We're not just simply made just for this world. It doesn't mean this world's unimportant, but it means we ought not find it to be in and of itself completely satisfactory, as if this is the end and the aim. That'd be a weird kind of materialism. The unbeliever can have no idea of what this life means to the believing Christian. For most people today, the future life has, like God, become a mere idea, and it therefore causes little pain and effort to deny as to affirm it. For the believing Christian, the future life is joy inconceivable, joy surpassing the joy he knows in this life through communion with God in prayer, in the liturgy, in the sacrament, because then God will be all in all, and there will be no falling away from this joy, which will indeed be infinitely enhanced. And so to the unbeliever and the believer, their entire way of looking at the goodness that we do and the reasons why we do those good things, or believe these things to be true, or avoid these things as false and lies, destructive, demonic lies, is not just because of temporal consequence. And saying, okay, there is an element of that. In fact, that's like robust in Catholic moral theology. Talk to any priest about this, right? or even ideas that we've got, regarding various consequences, even if you've gone to confession. You still got to deal with the temporal order because God placed you here. But at the same time, that is not the end all of the end all. It's not the be all, not the end all. The true believer has the consolation of a foretaste of eternal life. The believer in the modern God, having no such foretaste and hence no notion of Christian joy, cannot believe in the future life in the same way. Indeed, if he were honest with himself, he would have to admit that he cannot believe in it at all. If he's honest with himself. Thank God he's not. Thank God he's not. Thank God that no matter how hard an unbeliever tries, they are still made in the likeness and image of God. They still bear dignity of being an ensouled creature in a world with a creator-creature distinction. That they live, move, and have their being in God's world that reflects him, that expresses, revealing, right, to various degrees, his likeness, or his divinity, his attributes, his power. They can't avoid that. They can't get around that. And insofar as they do, they become completely dysfunctional. There are two primary forms of such disbelief, which passes for liberal belief: the Protestant and the humanist. The liberal Protestant view of the future life, shared regrettably by increasing numbers of those who profess to be Catholic and Orthodox, is like its views on everything else pertaining to the spiritual world, a minimal profession of faith that masks an actual faith in nothing. A minimal faith. The people are minimalists on this score. Look, I'm down with being a minimalist when it comes to clothes in your closet. When it comes to digital minimalism, how much time you spend online. I'm totally down. But your faith? Your faith? No way. The future life has become a shadowy underworld in the popular conception of it, a place to take one's deserved rest after a life of toil. Nobody has a very clear idea of this realm. Corresponds to no reality. It's rather an emotional projection, a consolation for those who would rather not face the implications of their actual unbelief. We see this a lot, don't we? We see this a lot. You go places and look, it's inevitable. You go places and they'll say, man, he's in a better place. And you're like, that guy's a scumbag. That guy was like downright evil. He did terrible things, molesting people left and right. And like, yeah, but it's a tough world, man. It's a tough world. And you're like, yeah, I get that. I also get the idea that you must, in fact, take a knee to Christ the King. I do, in fact, understand the idea that you must be born again. That makes sense, right? Makes a little bit of sense. It's kind of there. So it's an old message. Been around for a minute. It's that old-time gospel. But it comes around because the people that talk that way are the same people that talk about, yeah, man, old Jimmy's up in heaven now. He was down here partying. He was down here, hooking up with crazy prostitutes all the time, spreading gonorrhea left and right. He's doing a lot of drugs, it's true. But up in heaven, he's probably riding his quads. He loved that. He loved riding quads. What? He's probably playing some Super Mario. Yeah. And so, but that's the way they view it. It's a big play thing, like Pee-wee's Playhouse up in the sky. It's just Pee-wee's Playhouse. There's word of the day, probably. Probably you got one of those robots up there. Maybe the angels, that they're just cranking out words of the day and people say, ah! And they're like, oh man, heaven's dope. Quads, jet skis, word of the day, Pee-wee's Playhouse. Dude, this is awesome. Bless his heart. Such a heaven is the fruit of a union of Christian terminology with ordinary worldliness. And it's convincing no one who realizes that compromise in such ultimate matters is impossible. Neither the true Christian nor the consistent nihilist is seduced by it. But the compromise of humanism is, if anything, even less convincing. Here there's scarcely even the pretense that the idea corresponds to reality. All becomes metaphor and rhetoric. And look, it's one of these things where I think it's unsurprising that in a nihilistic world of our own, that people become all the more consumed with individuals that get caught up into Jungian stuff, Freudian stuff, talking about archetypes all the time, getting into, some of these old school traditionalists, and I mean like talking about blood and soil kind of traditionalist folks. Going old school. Evola. And so you've got different people that this is what they focus on. And look, there's a value. I'm not even denying that. I enjoy Jordan Peterson writing his stuff, especially now more than ever. I think it's remarkable to see. In fact, I've said this. I've said I may be the groundbreaking dude on Catholic presuppositionalism on the internet. And I defy people to prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Go online, look up for yourself. You're going to see a lot of your boy. However, if and when Jordan Peterson ever comes to the Catholic faith, he will be the world's most popular Catholic presuppositionalist. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And people over at, Catholic Answers, they're going to really struggle. They're going to, he's like mad wrong on that. He needs to understand. He needs to, listen a lot more to, our ideas about how the proper way of debating unbelievers is. It's going to happen. And pray to God it does, in fact. So I'm not against the idea of talking about archetypes. In fact, I talk about them all the time. Archetypes, motifs, forms. But at the same time, it's unsurprising that the classical liberal crowd, as that becomes more resurgent in response to the nihilism, right? It's kind of disabled Quasimodo cousin, arises. You've got the horseshoe theory, even with them. Nihilism arises, classical liberalism, both of those groups. You have a bunch of people who find, oh man, this crazy bandwagon of liberalism. They have to redefine things and say, well, let's call it leftism now. They want to distance themselves. I get it, but man, it's going to be trouble. And yes, Christopher Mount, I am talking about all other Catholic apologetics. You're right. Because I'm the only one advancing this model. And the empire is expanding. It's expanding, and the folks over there know it too. But it was something, I'm not the first one to think about it. In fact, I'm Bonaventurian in this regard. Augustinian in this regard. On the key fundamentals of this. St. Irenaeus, St. Francis de Sales. I already did a couple. Yeah, but they're talking about, so it's going against all of them, brother. All of them. Yes, because the presuppositions, the underlying classical liberals and nihilists are the same. Dude, you got to start your channel. He says, until I start my channel, you're alone. Brother, I want more and more and more. Look, Pine Sap, my boy. Pine Sap, Spexo, those guys are doing it. They got their aim is different with the show, right? They got a different audience, different apostolate, different people they're reaching and stuff. But it's been powerful to see the influence. And it was really cool, man. Somebody was talking to Pine Sap about the influence that he had on him. And talking about apologetics and how he was using this apologetic method. And Pine Sap wrote, he said, you need to thank Jeremiah. Dude, thank you, bro. It made me tear up a little eatsy. I'm not lying. Dude, I appreciate it. It's King Kong apologetics, man. Your boy's doing it guerrilla style over here. It's true. Right? But at the same time, man, I'm really happy to have folks like you. Really happy to have all the folks watching right now. Let's see. Such a heaven is the fruit of that union, right? The Christian terminology, ordinary worldliness. In either case, in that of the liberal Christian, or even the more liberal humanist, the inability to believe in eternal life is rooted in the same fact. They believe only in this world. They have neither experience nor knowledge of nor faith in the other world. And most of all, they believe in a God who is not powerful enough to raise men from the dead. Their thoroughly liberal sensibility, again, looks not to a transcendent, but to an eminent source for its ethical doctrine. I say the same thing about epistemology. They want it completely detached as if it's self-sufficient. And yeah, people are defending Jung in there. Dude, I read Jung. But I also say it's unsurprising that those particular individuals rise up. And look, a lot of people, I'm glad that they see that as a halfway house. That they're not down with Hermeticism and alchemy and the like. And they say, I was in that. Kind of like, same thing with myth. I love reading Ovid as much as the next guy. I love reading, Aeschylus, right? I love reading Euripides, all these other folks. I love reading that. Okay. In fact, it's one of my favorite things to read in all the world. I love the architecture, the art. I love it all. Okay. At the same time, right? Now, I like Norse stuff too. But it's unsurprising that when this happens, that you're seeing an increase in the rise of things ranging from, Hermeticism, alchemy, witchcraft, all sorts of Norse pagan stuff, all sorts of that. It's unsurprising that those things also arise. So that's the only extent. Not to say there's nothing good. I defend all these. I say that their truth in them is the strength and fact of the arguments that I'm making. If I take away the truth within them and the valuable contributions that various schools of thought make in the ultimate contribution of understanding the world, then my method of apologetics is toast. It's a big misunderstanding, by the way, of a lot of critics of the presuppositional argument that I'm advancing, is they don't understand that is what I'm saying, is that it's the power of that, is that they do know things. They do act in a way that makes sense. They live and move and have their being in a way that assumes the intelligibility of their experience or the reality in existence in an objective world outside of their mind. The intelligibility of the one and the many. But they don't look to the transcendent. And if so, only in these really abstract ways. That has to even fit maybe within models of naturalism, materialism. If there's no immortality, the liberal believes, one can still lead a civilized life. If there is no immortality, right, is the far profounder logic of the Dostoevsky's novels, all things are lawful. So if there's no immortality, if there's no immortality, all things are lawful. Okay? It's far more profound logic in Dostoevsky's novel. Humanist stoicism is possible for certain individuals for a certain time, until, that is, the full implications of the denial of immortality strike home. And that's one of those things. That's one of those things. You sit there and you're like, that sometimes it takes time to flesh itself out. And it's in fact a grace. It's a grace maybe as much as a curse. Wouldn't it be great if you just had bells go off every time you believed something that was wrong? Wouldn't that just be great? You're like, you say something, bang, 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 bang. You're like, whoa, okay, I hear you, Lord. I hear you. That's like the Joyce Meyer method. Joyce Meyer's like, anytime I say something wrong, the big bells go off in my head. Wow, you're really fortunate. It seems like it's broken, though. It's been broken, since day one, I think, with you. It's really bad. But it takes a long time. And when it takes time like that, on the one hand, in some areas, things that take time are for our benefit, like it's remarkable to see how people can eat in terrible ways or live in terrible ways, and they don't just die on the spot. That they live and continue, that's a grace in a way. It's also a curse if you never change. But it gives you time. On the other hand, you may believe something, and you're just reaping the rewards of the wickedness of that as you believe it, and it doesn't immediately snap into your head, oh my gosh, this is a wicked system that falls apart. This is wicked bad, leading me to all sorts of terrible things. The liberal lives in a fool's paradise, which must collapse before the truth of things. If death is, as the liberal and nihilist both believe, the extinction of the individual, then this world and everything in it, love, goodness, sanctity, everything, are as nothing. Nothing man may do is of any ultimate consequence. And that full horror of life is hidden from man only by the strength of their will to deceive themselves. I want to just read that again. Just soak it up. Soak it up. This is some good lit right here. If death is, as the liberal and nihilist both believe, the extinction of the individual, then this world and everything in it, love, goodness, sanctity, everything, are as nothing. Nothing man may do is of any ultimate consequence. And the full horror of life is hidden from man only by the strength of their will to deceive themselves. And all things are lawful. No otherworldly hope or fear restrains men from monstrous experiments or suicidal dreams. We see this more and more and more and more and more. In fact, it comes down to Nietzsche's words right here. The truth and prophecy of the new world that results from this view of all that which was formerly held to be true. Not one word is to be credited. Everything which was formerly disdained as unholy, forbidden, contemptible, and fatal, all these flowers now bloom on the most charming paths of truth. I think this is not just profound in the way that we can see it now. The things that were once deemed unholy, right, forbidden, taboo, are now paraded in an enormous kind of confusion that on the one hand, and we see this a lot of times with the video game and the brain crowd, that says, you can't tell anybody what a woman is. And yet, insistent, all the way, hardcore, and you better agree, or we're going to ruin your life. I'm a woman. I'm a woman. And you're sitting there, you're like, dude, bro. And then you say, well, what makes a woman? How dare you? Who can say? You just did, because I'm a woman. Well, what's a woman? How dare you? You're back loop-de-loop. Loop-de-loop till you're blue in the face, sick in the tummy-tums. Poo-poo, trash. It's the supreme irony of the liberal view that it is precisely when its deepest intent shall have been realized in the world and all men shall have been liberated from the yoke of transcendent standards, when even the pretense of belief in the other world shall have vanished. It's precisely then that life as the liberal knows or desires it shall have become impossible. For the new man that disbelief produces, can only see in liberalism itself the last of the illusions which liberalism wished to dispel. Let me read that again. I was a little bit confused there. Okay. It's precisely then that life as the liberal knows or desires it shall have become impossible. For the new man that disbelief produces can only see in liberalism itself the last of the illusions which liberalism wished to dispel. And I want to read here, this is an important thing in Catholic presuppositionalism, because it's true in general across the board, right? When dealing with systems analysis. I'm gonna put these words into the mouth of liberalism right here. It's true. Right? Wittgenstein. Tractator. My propositions, this is 6.54. Right at the very end, right before the index. Got it highlighted. I'll share it on the Wolfpack for people. My propositions serve as elucidations in the following way. Anyone who understands me eventually recognizes them as nonsensical when he has used them as steps to climb up beyond them. He must, so to speak, throw away the ladder after he has climbed up it. He must transcend these propositions, and then he will see the world aright. What we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. And that's what this is. And they see it in its final form, that all the things that led them there All those things are folly. Pass over the world in silence. It's the beating of the death drum. It's the wickedness of the abyss. He goes in and he talks about things I won't worry about too much. But he talks about the Christian order of politics, right? Founded on this idea of absolute truth. The principal providential form the government took in union with Christian thought was one of empire, wherein sovereignty was vested, in fact, in a monarch. Authority proceeded from him downwards through a hierarchical social structure. I think the social structure is most important in that, the hierarchical social structure. But a politics that rejects Christian truth must acknowledge the people, in fact, as sovereign, and understand authority as proceeding from below upward in a formally egalitarian way. Equalitarianism run amok, right? One is the perfect inversion, in fact, of the other. For they are opposed in their conceptions both of the source and of the end of government. And because they do, there's a harmony, isn't there? We talk about all the time. There's a harmony between the way that you begin, the presuppositions of your system, the means and measures that system uses, and the end result. Because the aim is determined, in fact, by the beginning, as well as the means are determined by the beginning and the end. To say, I'm driving in this direction because of that direction. We're the in-between. It's the meantime. And there's a harmony there. So if you take God out, and God's not there at the beginning, God's not there at the end, God's not there through and through. And in that sense, you would just have people. And you're going to have to come up with some crazy explanation for why this dude over here has the mega power, the superpowers, why they're at the top of the ladder and not, somebody else. So it inevitably it has a leveling effect. Inevitably, increasingly, infinitely. Anarchy is the government established by men and directed solely to this world. Government which has no higher aim than earthly happiness. And I think it's gracious. People say, yeah, but anarchy is not reigning supreme right now. You go, it's a cartoon. Again, eradicate the cartoon from the brain. Get the cartoon out of the mind. You must. Because things take time. Look at the way that actions follow ideas. Consequence. Ideas have consequences. It doesn't mean it will be immediate. It takes time to flesh itself out. It's a grace, in fact. But people like me, we get sick and tired sometimes of pointing at the writing on the wall. You know what? It gets kind of lame being a guy who for years of my life has been like Babe Ruth, pointing out and saying, this is the way it's going to go. We're going to hit this. Boom, boom, boom. It happens over. And people, it's amazing. I used to, because you focus on worldviews and you focus on paradigms, you focus on systems, you focus on how that incrementally plays itself out. Not just simply, is this one particular event going to happen in this one particular event? You show trends and trajectories. And you say, this is the way this is going. And you can demonstrate this by history, which is what we do here. We've showed it through enthusiasm. We showed it in the secularism series on how not to be secular, the secular age series. We showed this. And then we broke down why. And we're breaking it down here. But it gets old. Everybody's wrapped up in the flash in the pan logic of current events, which itself is part of the entire development. And the problem is that the liberal view of government, as one might suspect, is an attempt to compromise between irreconcilable ideas. It's to wed an old form to new content. It's a tough deal. There's a certain degree where that's possible. But there's a degree where it's not. And the only way that it's possible is, like, for example, you can infuse words, philosophical terms, with new meaning. that would be, you'd have to say, from my worldview, this is how I would understand, like, let's say, a concrete universal. Something like that. And you could say, here's how this would be understood, or coherence. This is how this is understood, as opposed to, let's say, Kant. But if your presuppositions are the same, you're toast. You're toast. Your redefinition, it's only in its outward appearance. Because you'd have, well, it's not just its outward appearance. It would go down to the very core, down to the very roots of the thing. And you're just going to watch as that'll die. Look at what it did with marriage. It's a great example of it. In the liberal view, God himself is a kind of constitutional monarch. His authority has been totally delegated to the people, and whose function is entirely ceremonial. You can see this most iconically, I think, in the United States of America, even our founding documents, and in the popular religion that prevails, as well as the popular apologetic that prevails. Revolution, like the disbelief which has always accompanied it, cannot stop halfway. It's a force that once awakened will not rest until it ends in a totalitarian kingdom of this world. And the revolution with liberals, so many of them have been simply offering concessions. That's what they always do. Showing they don't really have a truth with which to oppose this revolution, just to postpone it, but not to prevent it. It's its own kind of fatalism. It is. It's its own kind of fatalism. And in that way, I can imagine there being a number of your kind of more conservative types that would say, oh yeah, the Fourth Turning, that book, The Fourth Turning, I think there's a bunch of really great things in that book, by the way. I have a spiral view of history. So it's a mix of the linear, it's moving in a direction, right? It's moving in a direction. It has purpose and an aim. Okay, God is overseeing it. It is not this snake eating itself like the authors kind of have, but it lends itself in their idea to this fatalism of the cyclical history that's purely a cycle rather than a spiral that goes through time. Instead, because it's cyclical in that way, they say, well, once you figured out, we've given you the grid. Once you figured out what your role is, then you have to act out this role. You're going to lose. It always plays out this way. It's fatalism. You get a lot of this. The old truth is no longer true. And ultimately, the new truth must take its place. In the liberal worldview, therefore, in its theology, its ethics, its politics, and in other areas that we haven't even examined, truth has been weakened, softened, compromised. In all realms, truth was once absolute and became less certain, if not entirely relative. This, in fact, amounts to a definition of the liberal enterprise: to preserve for a time the fruits of a system and a truth which one is uncertain or skeptical. So they're skeptical, they're uncertain, they're not entirely sure. They emphasize the idea of, well, you can't have philosophical certainty. And they push that so far, you can see the effects of it on so many people, so many lay people. You don't even know. You just don't know what I deal with in my position doing what I do, with all the emails that I get from people, that it's one thing to say that obedience is pulled by a hair, led by a hair. I heard that. It's actually a cultist that said it, but it's a good point. Obedience is led by a hair, okay? It's fragile. But the idea that your faith is that way, that every day you're worried, you're asking questions that are like, well, but what if we find this? And what if archaeology discovers that? People are freaking out. They're between the wolves and the precipice. And every day they're looking off the edge, wondering if today is the day that the foundation just falls apart. Why do you think I emphasize the transcendental argument? Why do you think one of the main reasons, other than that, well, it's true, and it's powerful, but because it's powerful in equipping the believer to truly stand on a foundation of faith that is not like the sinking sand that liberalism has provided. They've been slipping and sliding in sinking sand. And I'm like, what are you doing? There's a foundation right here. It's infuriating. You don't even know. You don't know what it's like. Unless you're in this position and you get these things too. Maybe you do. Maybe you get that. I'd love to talk to you. I want to talk to you. I want to coordinate. In fact, I'll put it this way. If you're somebody who loves presuppositional apologetics and you want to form a megazord with your boy, if that's what you want, I'm being dead serious. You want that? Contact me. We're going to do this thing. Because I'm watching as this apostasy is taking over, crisis left and right, all these people lacking their faith, and here the whole time they're saying they believe in the God that is all truth, that knowledge and wisdom, understanding, that these things begin with the fear of the Lord, and yet every single day they're on the brink, on the edge of the precipice. Oh no, constantly afraid that they're going to fly off. What do you mean fly off? I don't blame them. They were born into this crap. They were born into this. And for so long, people thought piecemeal replies would suffice. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't. And deep down inside, they got to know. They got to look around and see how far can we go down the slippery slide to HE double hockey sticks. How long? What kind of wicked pride? Monocling up left and right. Every day. Put God in the dock. If you want to be part of a group that says enough is enough of that, and you want to form that megazord looking mega dope, rocking out, pushing hard, advancing arguments, counter arguments, everything else, you got different gifts and talents. Are you a writer? Are you a speaker? Do you make memes? Do you know how to do GIFs? Do you edit videos? Do you do podcasting? What do you do? What's that gift and talent? If I'm talking to you and you're sitting there going, is he talking to me? I think he might be talking to me. I'm talking to you. I want to know you. We got a lot of work to do. And you know it. Come on now. And don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. We're not islands, man. We're not islands, woman. We do this thing together. You say, let's do this. Let's seriously do this. I'm already working on it behind the scenes. I've already got big plans about it. You want to be part of that? Hit up your boy. The liberal may be interested in culture and learning and business, or merely in comfort, but in every one of his pursuits, the dimension of the absolute is simply absent. I'd say, or it's just simply fading away. It's like a mist that's slowly going away. He's unable or unwilling to think in terms of ends, of ultimate things. Life in that regard is a flash in the pan, right? The thirst for the absolute truth has vanished. It's swallowed up, in fact, by his worldliness. We need to get back to that place where we know that everyone that is of the truth hears my voice, the Lord. We need to get back to that place. No one's rightly sought the truth who's not encountered at the end of this search whether to accept or to reject him, our Lord Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. The liberal who thinks his universe secure against this truth, this capital T truth, is the rich man of the parable, overburdened by his worldly interests and ideas, unwilling to give them up for the humility, poverty, and lowliness that are the marks of the genuine seeker after the truth. That's why the world doesn't even ask why anymore. It's the second definition that Nietzsche gave to it. There's no truth, and that is, there's no answer to the question why. Nihilism thus means the ultimate questions have no answers. That is to say, no positive answers. The nihilist is he who accepts the implicit no of the universe that it supposedly gives as its answer to these questions. But there are two ways of accepting this. There's the extreme path, wherein it is made explicit and amplified in the programs of revolution and destruction. This would be active nihilism. Active. For in Nietzsche's words, quote, nihilism is not only the belief that everything deserves to perish, but one actually puts one's shoulder to the plow. One destroys, end quote. But there's also a moderate path. There's a moderate path. That's a passive or implicit nihilism. The nihilism of liberal, the humanist, the agnostic. They agree that there's no truth, ultimately, but no one asks the ultimate questions. Active nihilism presupposes this. It becomes totalitarian. You end up enduring a kind of ruthless re-education of the people because you have to re-educate. It's inevitable no matter what. In a world of sin, you're going to have to deal with that. Few subjects to this process for any length of time have entirely escaped its influence. In fact, at this point, in our secular age, it's the water that we're swimming in. It's like my kids growing up in a world where they've never known a world without cell phones and devices and Xboxes and stuff. In many of our worlds, we've never known anything other than this. It would be a foreign world. And in fact, to a certain extent, it will be foreign even if we embraced it. But there's this deadly skepticism that reigns, hidden behind the remains of a Christian heritage which few people even believe, and even fewer believe it with deeper conviction. The profound responsibility the scholar once possessed, the communication of truth, has been reneged. And all the pretended humility that seeks to conceal this fact behind sophisticated chatter on the quote-unquote limits of human knowledge is but another mask of the nihilism the liberal academic shares with the extremists of our day. Instead, they talk history of ideas, comparative studies, and leave it at that. And again, I like talking about history of ideas. But that's what enthusiasm was. I like talking about comparative religions, but not for the sake of comparison. There's an end goal there. I want to see people truly converted. I want to see people changed. It's the driving force of every single thing that I do here. Those who seek to preserve the prestige of truth without believing in it offer the most potent weapon to all their enemies. A merely metaphorical faith is suicidal. The liberal, under this persistent attack, gives way on point after point, forced to admit the negative, critical truth with any positive truth of his own. Oh, sorry about that. The liberal, under this persistent attack, gives way on point after point, forced to admit the truth of the charges against him without being able to counter on this negative critical truth, which with any positive truth of his own. I need bifocals. I need bifocals. I need to put it up here, but then you don't see me. I'll put it over here. Why not do that? I'm looking down like this. I'm like, man, I do need bifocals for real. Until after a long and usually gradual transition, of a sudden, he awakens to discover that the old order, undefended and seemingly indefensible, has been overthrown, and that a new, more realistic and more brutal truth has taken the field. Liberalism is the first stage of the nihilist dialectic, both because its own faith is empty and because this emptiness calls into being a yet more nihilistic reaction, a reaction that ironically proclaims even more loudly than liberalism its love of truth, while carrying mankind one step farther on the path to error. This reaction is the second stage of the nihilistic dialectic, realism. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. All right. Again, remember, make sure to go and check out the show, part 1. You can do that. You can check out part 1 in the description below. It's got a link to the full catalog, right? It's a little messy. It's all over the map, but it's everything I've done, right? And you can find playlists, different ones, on my personal YouTube channel, and you need to subscribe to that. I'm going to be doing a lot of work on there. Okay, in fact, this weekend, we're going to be talking to Jake Fowler, PaleocratDiaries. He's going to be in town today. He's going to be at church with me, right? It's going to be a whole bunch of fun. We're going to have ourselves a good old time, right? And so we're going to talk about that. We'll do a live show, right? And we'll do, of course, a whole bunch of live shows over on Telegram. But if you want to know, if you want to follow this, we're going to create a playlist. We're going to create a playlist for the Enthusiasm series, for the Lasant series, for Secularism series, for the Word of Faith and the Cults, the Enthusiasm Now series, about presuppositionalism, and all the different books. Each book will get its own. So if you just want to simply follow that, you can do it. Our anti-sedevacantism series, where we obliterated, destroyed. It's up in smoke, it's ashes, it's a joke. I strongly encourage people, just go watch it. It's over. Don't even waste your time on that crap anymore. Just let it go. It's nonsense. So yeah, and St. Francis de Sales, right? St. Francis de Sales, St. Irenaeus, rocking the daylights out of it. St. Matthew, chapter 18. I love this show. I love doing what I do, right? And it's because of the support of folks like you. Find us on Patreon. Link in the description below. And just know that everything in the meantime, no matter what, it'll always be free from me to you. See me over on Telegram. I'm going right now. Till next time, never give up. Keep on smiling. And memento mori.
I wanted to make people dream bigger thoughts.